The studio was already humming with its usual pre-show tension. But there was something sharper in the air that morning, something electric, almost metallic, as if the walls themselves could sense what was about to happen. Morning sunlight cut through the tall glass panels behind the host's table, slicing across the polished surface of the desk so that every mote of dust glittered like it was under a magnifying glass. Cameras rolled on their smooth tracks. Producers murmured into headsets. And then she walked in. Lady Gaga was no stranger to this stage, but today she carried herself like a woman arriving not for a performance, but for a trial. Her heels struck the floor with an audible rhythm, a declaration in each step. There was no smile, no playful tilt of the head, no lightness in her gait. Instead, her mouth was set in a thin, painted line, and her eyes, those famous unblinking eyes, were fixed. Straight ahead, across the table, Sunny Hostin shifted in her chair. She had been a prosecutor once, and in moments like this, the history returned in her posture. Back straight, chin slightly raised, voice already sharpening in anticipation. Your tweets last night accused elected officials of cover-ups. She began, her tone cool, deliberate. Did you mean to incite division on national television? Gaga didn't flinch. Her voice was measured, but there was an edge beneath it, a tremor not of fear, but of restrained fury. I meant to wake you up. A ripple moved through the audience. It wasn't a laugh, not quite a gasp, something in between. On screen, the moment was a freeze frame of confrontation. Celebrity and journalist, locked in a duel neither could afford to lose. And somewhere, far beyond the cameras, the rest of the country leaned closer to its screens, sensing that the next 30 minutes would not pass quietly. The pause after Gaga's words was brief, but it seemed to stretch and twist in the air, like heat above asphalt. Sunny leaned forward, folding her hands together on the desk as if bracing for impact. Her expression didn't break, no smirk, no flinch, just that deliberate, steady gaze she had mastered in countless interviews and cross-examinations. You're aware, she said slowly, that the congressional hearing yesterday was already under intense scrutiny. Your choice of words, silencing survivors, has been interpreted by many as an accusation of criminal conduct. Are you implicating specific legislators in a conspiracy? The question hit with surgical precision. Cameras caught Gaga's, lashes lowering for a heartbeat, her jaw tightening. She could have deflected, most guests would have, but instead her voice came low, steady, and unyielding. I'm implicating a system, she said, that privileges power over survival. The studio audience shifted in their seats. It wasn't the kind of show where guests were expected to wield indictments like blades. And yet here it was, an accusation not tied to a single name, but to an entire machine. Sunny's brow arched, her tone still even, but with the faintest edge of challenge. That's powerful language, but power cuts both ways. You speak to millions, and your words have weight. Don't you think there's a responsibility to be precise? Gaga leaned in now, mirroring Sunny's posture. The light caught on the thin gold chain at her neck. And what about the responsibility to tell the truth before it's polished? Down to nothing? The moment had shifted. This was no longer a celebrity interview. It had become a courtroom without gavels, a public inquisition streamed live. Every blink, every breath between them was a chess move. And behind the cameras, producers glanced at one another. This was not the segment they had scripted, but it was the one they knew would explode across the internet before noon. Sunny's fingers tapped lightly against the desk once, twice, 3 times before stilling. She was calculating her next move, like a litigator deciding whether to press a witness or let them speak themselves into the corner. The studio lights felt hotter now, a halo of heat settling over the table. You've built an entire platform. She began, her tone deliberate, on advocacy for survivors. The Born This Way Foundation. Your work with assault prevention programs, those are facts. But last night, you put out a statement that half the country is now interpreting as a direct accusation against sitting members of Congress. She let the words hang, sharp and heavy. Do you understand why that concerns me? Gaga's gaze didn't waver. Her hands, clasped in front of her, tightened slightly before she spoke. I understand that people who are comfortable will always be concerned when the truth makes them uncomfortable. She let her voice swell, just enough to ride over the soft rustle of the audience. I'm speaking for the ones who can't, those who don't have a national stage, those who will be buried in paperwork before anyone believes them. Sunny leaned in. That's noble. But in law, noble intentions don't excuse reckless statements. The words landed like a gavel strike. Gaga inhaled, her shoulders drawing back, her presence suddenly larger than the confines of the desk. And in art and in life, reckless silence kills more than reckless truth ever will. A murmur rippled through the studio, this time louder. Somewhere in the front row, a woman clasped her hands together and nodded slowly. The camera caught it, a fleeting, unscripted moment that said more than the entire segment had so far about Sunny. Didn't look away. She was pushing, but she knew she'd just stepped into dangerous territory. Gaga wasn't shrinking under pressure. She was gathering momentum. And with every exchange, the air felt closer to snapping. The studio's air seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken energy as Gaga's words settled. She reached beneath the table and pulled out a small framed photo, one of those quiet moments rarely caught on camera. A younger version of herself stared back, eyes wide, vulnerable, untouched by the harsh glare of fame. Her voice softened, but the intensity never left. You ask about responsibility, about facts. This isn't just rhetoric for me. It's personal. Every statistic I cite, every story I amplify, comes from a place of survival my own and those I love. Sunny's expression flickered, not with doubt, but with recognition. She too carried the weight of trauma, though hers was etched differently in the courtroom battles, in the voices she'd sought to defend and hold accountable. Her voice lowered, the prosecutorial steel tempered with empathy. I hear you, she said quietly. But as someone who's been on both sides of that courtroom, I worry. Words like yours can rally people, yes, but they can also fracture trust in institutions we need to protect survivors long term. Gaga's gaze locked with hers, fierce and unwavering. And help me protect them. Help me make sure their voices aren't drowned out by political spin or legal loopholes. The tension was no longer just ideological, it was deeply human. Two women caught in the crossfire between activism and accountability. The audience felt the shift. Some leaned forward, riveted. Others sat back, wary of where this was heading. A producer's whispered prompt edged into the moment, but neither woman blinked. The conversation was on a razor's edge, teetering between breakthrough and breakdown. Sunny's next question cut through the silence like a blade. If your words cause harm through misinterpretation, will you take responsibility? Will you apologize? The question hung heavy, impossible. Gaga's jaw clenched, the studio seemingly holding its breath before the storm broke. Lady Gaga's eyes narrowed, a fire kindling beneath her calm exterior. She sat up straighter, the glare of studio lights catching the edge of her carefully sculpted cheekbones. Apology? She repeated, voice steady but laced with quiet defiance. No, I won't apologize for shining a light on a broken system. Her words echoed in the quiet studio like a verdict. Sunny's face softened, a brief flicker of understanding passing through her gaze. Clarification matters, she said, voice measured. Words have power, especially yours. In a moment when emotions run high, precision can be the difference between justice and chaos. Gaga leaned forward, hands clasped tightly, as if holding back a flood. I'm not here to play word games. I'm here for survivors who have waited. decades for a voice. Sometimes the truth has to roar, not whisper. The hosts and producers exchanged glances, tension mounting like a symphony building to its crescendo. Social media was already alight with clips and hot takes, public opinion fracturing into tribal lines. Fans rallied behind Gaga's courage. Critics accused her of reckless grandstanding. The ideological divide stretched wide, the activist demanding radical change through unfiltered emotion, the journalist insisting on careful navigation of facts and impact. Both women, in their own way, wielded truth like a weapon. Gaga offered a rare olive branch. If it means bringing survivors to this platform, real people, telling their stories, then I'm willing to work with you. But the focus must stay on them, not on me. Sunny considered this, the weight of the moment settling between them. Survivors deserve dignity and safety, she said finally. But that requires more than passion. It requires responsibility. The conversation had reached a pivotal juncture, and the studio felt the shifting tide between confrontation and collaboration, between fire and reason. The air grew heavier, the hum of studio machinery fading into the background as the moment stretched taut between them. Gaga's proposal hung like a challenge in the charged silence. Producers exchanged uneasy glances, aware that the broadcast was veering into territory no one had scripted. Sunny's voice dropped to a quieter, more measured tone. If survivors come forward on this platform, their stories must be handled with the utmost care. This can't be a spectacle. It must be a sanctuary. Gaga's eyes burned with urgency. Exactly. I'm not asking for a spotlight on me. I'm asking for truth to break through the noise. Will you help me create that space? The tension rippled through the room. Behind the scenes, legal advisors flicked through notes, weighing risks and liabilities. The camera caught the subtle shift in Hostin's posture, an almost imperceptible nod toward solidarity, but also a cautious distance born of journalistic rigor. I want to, Sunny replied, but it must be done responsibly. Survivors. Safety comes first. Suddenly, the producer's voice buzzed in her earpiece. Time was running short. Before Sunny could add more, Gaga stood abruptly, her chair scraping sharply against the floor. No, she said, her voice steady but firm. Enough of second-guessing. I will not be silenced while speaking truth. The studio fell silent. Gaga's heels clicked sharply as she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Cameras captured her silhouette against the glowing studio lights. A woman both defiant and vulnerable. Sunny sat frozen for a heartbeat, then exhaled slowly, caught between disbelief and the unspoken acknowledgement that this was a turning point. Confrontation had erupted into a fracture, one that would reverberate far beyond the studio walls. The studio felt hollow after Gaga's abrupt exit. Cameras lingered on the empty chair she left behind, a stark symbol of fractured dialogue and unresolved fury. The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of what just transpired settling like dust in the air. Sunny remained seated, her hands clasped tightly on the desk. Her voice was quieter now, touched with a mix of regret and resolve. We lost her, but did we lose the moment too? There are stories here that need to be heard, stories that go beyond headlines and hot takes. The social media storm erupted instantly. Clips of Gaga's storming off went viral, dividing audiences into camps of praise and condemnation. Some hailed her bravery, others decried what they saw as impulsiveness undermining serious discourse. The narrative spun wildly in every direction, leaving facts tangled with emotion. Backstage, Gaga paced silently, the adrenaline still coursing, but the fight far from over. Her mind raced through every word exchanged, every challenge thrown. She wasn't just defending a tweet, she was defending the very urgency that propelled her activism. On air, Sunny prepared to continue, balancing our role as journalists with the complex human emotions now entangled in the conversation. The studio's polished veneer cracked just enough to reveal the fragile, raw stakes beneath. This was more than a television segment. It had become a public reckoning, one where empathy clashed with accountability, and where the line between ally and adversary blurred. The country watched, breath held, waiting to see which way the story would turn. The following morning dawned with a different kind of tension, quieter, but no less charged. News outlets and social media platforms buzzed relentlessly, dissecting every frame, every word, every glance from the previous day's broadcast. Opinion pieces flooded timelines, some calling Gaga's exit a bold stand for survivors' voices, others condemning it as a reckless stunt that fractured essential dialogue. Sunny Hostin appeared on a morning newspanel, her demeanor composed but unmistakably weighed down. "The goal," she said carefully, "has always been to foster conversations that lead to real change. But that requires trust between survivors, advocates, and the public. When emotions run high, it's easy for messages to become distorted." Behind the scenes, Gaga released a statement, her words carefully measured yet fiercely honest. "My anger was born of grief, not impulse. I regret how the conversation ended, but I do not regret shining a light on the systemic failures that harm survivors every day." The public's response was mixed. Some saw the exchange as a watershed moment, a raw glimpse into the complexities of activism in media. Others viewed it as a cautionary tale about the limits of passion in political discourse. In the weeks that followed, dialogues began to shift. Survivors' organizations reached out to both women, proposing collaborative efforts to amplify authentic voices safely and respectfully. The narrative moved from confrontation toward cautious cooperation. The emotional fallout lingered, wounds from the clash still tender, but a new chapter was quietly taking shape, one where understanding and accountability might finally find common ground. The stage was set for healing, but only if both fire and reason could walk forward together. Days later, a joint statement captured headlines nationwide, an unexpected moment of reconciliation between two fiercely principled women. Gaga's words were heartfelt. "My anger was born of grief, not impulse. I stand by the urgency of my message, but acknowledge the need for dialogue." Sunny's statement mirrored the sentiment. "I sought clarity, not confrontation. In striving for truth, I may have lost sight of the passion that fuels change." The media buzzed with analysis, some calling it a watershed moment in activist-journalist relations, others skeptical but hopeful. Op-eds praised the courage to bridge divides, highlighting how public discourse can evolve beyond polarizing soundbites. Behind the scenes, plans took shape. Both women agreed to collaborate on a special episode of the show, designed to center survivors' voices with trauma-informed care and journalistic integrity. Emotionally, this was a step toward mutual respect. Gaga, acknowledging the limits of anger as a tool, found new strength in partnership. Sunny, embracing empathy alongside scrutiny, opened the door to healing. Intellectually, their dialogue reframed the debate. Truth could be both passionate and precise. Advocacy could be fierce yet responsible. The public watched closely as the once tense adversaries transformed into cautious allies, a testament to the possibility of unity in a fractured landscape. This chapter of confrontation was closing, but the story was far from over. Together, they would face new challenges, real voices, real stories, and the complex pursuit of justice that demands both fire and care. Weeks later, the studio lights returned, not with tension, but with a sense of purpose. Survivors from across the country took their seats on The View, their faces steady, their voices ready. The atmosphere was reverent, charged with a quiet strength that filled every corner of the room. Sunny Hostin welcomed them with warmth, her usual sharpness softened by genuine respect. Thank you all for trusting us to share your stories today. Lady Gaga sat beside her, no longer a figure of confrontation, but of solidarity. "Your truth matters," she said softly, her eyes meeting those of the survivors with an unspoken pledged out. The testimonies unfolded raw, unfiltered, powerful. Each story a testament to resilience, each voice a call for systemic change. The camera lingered not on spectacle, but on humanity. Behind the scenes, producers and legal advisors worked meticulously to ensure the safety and dignity of everyone involved. The collaboration between Gaga and Hostin had transformed the narrative. From conflict to healing, the audience, both in the studio and at home, felt the weight and the hope of the moment. This was more than a television episode. It was a communal reckoning, a step toward justice that honored both passion and responsibility. As the show drew to a close, the hosts stood united. The political courtroom drama that had erupted weeks before now found its resolution not in victory or defeat, but in shared humanity and the power of truth spoken and heard. The story ended on a note that resonated far beyond the studio walls. When fire meets reason, justice can rise. Months later, the echoes of that unforgettable confrontation continued to ripple through public discourse. Documentaries dissected the moment. Podcasts debated its meaning. Activists cited it as a turning point, a vivid example of how raw emotion and journalistic rigor can collide and, ultimately, coexist. Lady Gaga, once seen solely as a pop icon, had reshaped her public persona into that of a relentless advocate, her activism now inseparable from her artistry. Sunny Hostin's reputation as a fierce yet compassionate truth-seeker deepened, her role bridging the worlds of media and justice. Together, their uneasy alliance had sparked new conversations about how the media framed survivor stories, the responsibilities of public figures, and the fragile balance between passion and precision. Universities hosted panels analyzing the interplay of celebrity, influence, and political accountability. Survivors groups found renewed energy, inspired by the visibility and complexity of the dialogue sparked on live television. But beneath the headlines and accolades, both women knew the work was far from over. The system they challenged remained resistant, and every step forward demanded vigilance, courage, and compassion. The final scene was not one of closure, but of ongoing commitment, a testament to the messy, difficult, and necessary journey toward justice in a fractured society. The story of that day, on The View, had become more than spectacle. It had become a catalyst. And in that catalyst, hope endured. As the months turned into a year, the impact of that fiery exchange settled into a new cultural rhythm. Lady Gaga and Sunny Hostin found themselves invited to forums, interviews, and think tank spaces where their once public clash became a foundation for deeper conversations about power, responsibility, and healing. Both women spoke candidly about the lessons learned, the necessity of holding space for both outrage and accountability, of balancing the urgency of activism with the precision of journalism. Their voices, once at odds, now echoed in harmony. Across diverse platforms, public awareness around survivor rights gained momentum, propelled not only by policy shifts, but by the raw authenticity that emerged from that televised confrontation. New initiatives blossomed, many inspired by the joint efforts that followed their reconciliation. Yet the story also served as a cautionary tale. Media outlets revisited their protocols on trauma-informed reporting. Celebrities and advocates alike grappled with the fine line between speaking truth and managing public perception. For Gaga and Hostin, the journey was ongoing, marked by challenges, but also profound breakthroughs. They had moved beyond adversaries into partners in a complex, vital fight for justice. The legacy of that day endured not as a closed chapter, but as a living dialogue, a reminder that in the theater of politics and media, true progress often arises from conflict, courage, and compromise. And so, beneath the spotlight's glare, their story continued unfolding, evolving, and inspiring those who dared to speak truth to power.